Night of the Hunt 4. Like grim spectres did the lonesome clerics wander the nocturnal halls of the cathedral. Caddoc thought it particularly dreadful amidst the quietude that some were still up despite the late hour. Granted, it gave him free rein over the halls, as their footsteps were by no means as silent as his own, making their approach easy to detect and subsequently avoid. With their hoods up to darken their faces, they occasionally would cross with his path, and would walk on undisturbed and unknowing of his presence, as he proficiently melded with the abundant darkened corners. Entering the Vicar's office, he found it empty. He was primarily looking for some sort of master key or the like, as his main suspicion was that the relic was kept deep in the church's storage, locked in some vault. But he was also under the impression that the Vicar himself would be its guardian. But from some cursory investigations the days prior, the man seemed strangely difficult to get a hold of, or even hear any mentions of. Quickly into his search, when going through the drawers of the desk, he found a single key, very ornamental and placed upon a folded note that was well worn, having been folded with several times to a manic degree. The writing on it was simple, the dates of the last 8 days in a column. Next to each of them stood 1/3 of a gallon, but all had been subtracted with different values, measured in pints. He looked once more at the key, spotting that an engraving was placed upon it. F-5. He was on the 4th floor. He had anticipated all along that the whereabouts of the relic would have to come from the man himself, as he was unlikely to find it on his own. So he exited the Vicar's office and headed for the stairs in the hopes of finding more of the Vicar's location. Well at the upper floor, he came upon an ominous corridor that, upon walking a short distance in, he realized the entire floor was a layout of crossing corridors. He looked down to his both sides and straight ahead. The most important thing would be to remember the entryway, and he decided to walk along the outermost corridor first. He headed to the right and walked all the way to the end, where he turned left into a corridor with windows on his right, until he came upon the first locked door. He tried the key, and it fit. On the other side was a completely empty room, with only some shelves and cupboards. Otherwise, it seemed to have been purposely vacated. He locked it shut and continued on with the hopes to try another one. After having reached the end of the corridor, he turned left and walked all the way around back to the entry, having unlocked another door with a similar interior. Then he stepped further towards the center, into the second layer of corridors, and walked around it in search of the proper room. Each section was poorly lit, with only candles positioned in the corners of the four-way junctions, rendering every pathway consumed by obscurity. Most of the doors were unlocked, which he walked right past. The locked ones mostly held the vacant status, but those that did not appeared downright ghastly. In one he found several metal coffins surrounded by chains, their lids open. In another, he discovered a near-preserved beast carcass on an operating table, surrounded by foreboding statues situated in the corners of the room. One held numerous glass containers of different shapes and sizes, all containing morbid shapes that his dark vision fortunately did not allow him to distinguish the gruesome nature of. For each locked door, he found something equally grotesque, more and more cultivating an image of the church as having an unhealthy obsession with beasts. For each door, it became harder and harder to fit the key into the lock, as his hand had started to tremble slightly. Arriving at the central and innermost corridor, the door was one of few lit up by flanking candles. A peek through the keyhole revealed two light sources coming from beside the door, yet the door was locked. He quickly unlocked it and darted inside, pushing the door close as fast and quiet as the wind after having entered. The room he had entered into was considerably darker. By the entry sat two singular scones on opposite sides of the magnificent double door, giving a gloomy light that did not serve sufficiently to illuminate the entirety of the space. There was a rug in front of him that stretched far beyond, appearing as if unending in the dark that took it. Then there came a sound whose core properties could best be described as a long exhale. Its presence filled the room, and it caused him to freeze where he stood, as if the immensity was what compelled him in place. It was deep, and not wholly solid in the sense it seemed strained or afflicted, and the tone culminated in a sequence of feeble, stuttering inhales, like some form of cruel mockery. He stood by the door for the duration of the 3 additional and equally excruciating breaths, where the inhale seemed more akin to a breeze blowing through a mountain pass. He managed to move further into the room, and although his sight was fairly functional in complete darkness, he was no feline predator and had not the luxury of complete sight. The breathing continued, and he came upon an altar of stone, laid with a red cloth. Upon it stood a vessel of gold that housed a dark matter. Next to it lay an upturned, freakish hand of a man, where the middle finger had grown like a talon among the still conventional fingers, now sprouting hair, craggy skin and black claws. The breathing stopped, and a voice came through with attempts to convey speech stutteringly. You. The hand moved, with its palm faced down, and despite the massive finger, it pointed to the best of its abilities to the side, where a gas lantern stood.
No hunters here. Only beasts. Thy intent?
I'm looking for... A guttural sound interrupted him. A deep growling breath escaped the man as he leaned forward with a loud creak. A hairy head came into view in the dark over the bowl, and sounds of deep slurping commenced, like a dog. Caddock moved to grab the lantern and stepped back to light it, having become incredibly wary. With the light came horrible insight. Hunched and devouring from the vessel with both hands, braced against the sides, sat a hulking figure with a long mane of hair obscuring most of his character. But quite distinctly could be seen the white and holy mantle, visible beneath the tarnished black strands of thick hair. The character leaned back once more, his chair creaking as he did before coming to rest. The mouth was stretched open, the neck seemed abnormally long, and the hair on his head had grown wild. The jaw was incredibly enlarged, and even the entirety of the face seemed to have protruded slightly forward from its original and conventional complexion. It bore the Vicar's robe, stained and marked with patches of hair growing out from it. The other hand, the left one, was much longer and remained laying beside the vessel, whereas the right was drawn back to the armrest. The strained, bestial breathing began anew. Vicar Harald? He blinked with his glossy eyes, but once they focused on him, they seemed to become clear. Perhaps they were even glowing with blasphemous light. You were there, with Laurence, with the cord of an infant.
Laurence, the first embraced. Crow hunter, hast ye come to slay a beast?
What happened that night?
This.
He slowly raised his uneven arms out before him, like a skyward prayer, a gesture that seemed to demand great effort from him.
Ye hunt of hunters, thy duty.
His speech momentarily transitioned into a nonsensical groan.
Duty is for naught. All must one day embrace what is coming, as Saint Laurence did.
But he used a cord. Where is it? The thing before him sniveled like a child. But the sound was so warped by the metamorphosis, none would preferably link the innocence of a child to its likeness.
That thing. Oh, I kept it. A sacred relic.
Do you know what it is?
The Vicar, the promise they never told. But I knew it once I saw it. They must have used it.
Where is it? Once more his eyes focused on him and let out a gurgling groan.
You seek the cord. I cannot give it, for it sustains me. Soon I will succeed where St. Laurence failed.
I'm sorry, Vicar, but that relic will not give you what you seek.
The cord will sustain me.
Tell me, what happened to Laurence, the first Vicar? His eyes were drawn back up into the ceiling, where he mournfully kept them.
He died for us. Oh, Saint Laurence.
He died a beast. The code is not what you think. Give it to me, and I can make sure you die like you are, not a beast. When he held out his hand towards him, the glowing eyes looked upon him, trembling in their sockets.
You are but a hunter. What can you possibly know of the divine relic?
What he saw, he thought to be the glow growing stronger and the snarl in his voice more prevalent. But like water over fading embers, tears caused the abhorrent eyes to become human once more.
Were I to give it ye, I would succumb to the allure. I failed.
Man ought not to die like a beast. As if it was his own back that produced the wooden creaking, he once more leaned slowly forward to slouch over the vessel. His hand surrounded it, and the fingers trembled as he looked, horrified, into the reflection of the dark blood. His right hand moved hauntingly slow, out of sight beneath the altar's surface, to produce a tiny, ornate silver box that he placed in front of him.
Here, now. I tire of this. wonderful darkness, or poisonous drink.
He lowered his head, and before retrieving the blade of mercy, Caddoc put out the lantern. Caddoc barged into the office of the Healing Church workshop, leaving the upper cathedral ward behind. There he saw Henriette sitting in the same spot upon him first entering to meet with the cleric attendant Felderworth. She flew up in her seat, adjusting her posture as he approached, spurred by the slamming of the door.
Where's Ludwig?
He muttered loudly. Huh? He just left.
Well, I need to speak with him.
What about? He sighed and without further notice turned towards the stairwell. The chair she sat in screeched as she stood up hastily to follow. He went to the proper lounge, but what of it? What did they say?
What is he doing in that place?
He said, still in a mutter over his shoulder. How should I know? He did not say. With haste, they left the workshop and entered out into the cathedral's round plaza, where he set course for the great bridge towards central Yarnam. Having not made any acknowledgement of having Henriette as a follower, he eventually turned towards her while still walking briskly.
What do you know about the choir, Miss Henriette?
The choir? She responded inquisitively.
What do you know about who leads the Healing Church?
Recognition came over her face. Oh, the Vicar? Not much. And the choir is just the choir, I think. But what about them? Did you find out anything?
Not much. The Cainhurst situation is still murky, but I'm afraid there is another piece yet to be considered.
What? You mean the choir?
I have the suspicion they did not want me looking into the Cainhurst matter, which leads me to believe they are a bunch that does not want anyone looking into anything, you know?
Uh-huh. The church doesn't like your sleuthing?
I don't know yet, but our captain's impression of these informal leaders might shed some light.
They walked onto the great bridge, where the wind immediately picked up. Informal leaders? What makes you say that?
Anyone that likes to control information and is able to do so is an informal leader. Besides, they exist within the church and along the Vicar. And while we know much about Vicar Peyton, the choir might not just be the singers during communion, but something else. And I too would like to be viewed as something so easily overlooked if I knew things I did not want others to know.
The information silenced Henriette, and for a time they walked without exchanging more words. Upon turning off the main central street, they stumbled upon two rather aggressive church-garbed men muscling up on a seemingly harmless man with a balding head. The two of them were of the black church hunters, distinguishable by the standard hat atop a dark hood and the short matching black chasuble, making them look noticeably clerical while retaining a form of ordinarity. The occurrence itself was not particularly striking, as many would simply turn their heads and avert their eyes. But had it not been so that Caddock fleetingly knew the man, he would have done the same. He approached, and both of the hooded heads turned his way, ceasing their berating of the almost cowering man.
"What is this supposed to mean?"
He nearly spat at the two men, not being in full control over how his frustration influenced him. At first, their faces suggested dumbfounded surprise, then haughty offense, and finally became that of confusion once more as they glanced over at Henriette, who visibly looked more as a hunter than himself.
Sir, would you please step back while we conduct our business? Business of harassment? On what grounds do you mean he is a threat?
Caddock insisted.
Well, sir, interfering with,
The church hunter quickly glanced doubtfully at Henriette, then back at him.
Church business? That warrants an investigation.
That won't be... Caddock started, but Henriette cut him off. That won't be necessary. We are both hunters. She flashed the radiant holy blade badge. An awkward silence ensued, disturbed only by the quick snorts of the prosecuted man.
Get out of here, Huxley. Forget about this. You were never involved.
Caddock gestured back towards the main street, and with a hesitant look at everyone involved, the scampering man hurried away from the scene.
Well,
one of the church hunters began, after having watched him turn the corner. Then he looked Caddock over from top to bottom with a demeaning hint.
Retired, are we?
He did not confirm or deny. The hunter smirked.
The next time, leave it to the professionals. No offense, old hunter.
The two of them departed in the same direction as the man had previously left in. Caddock was quick to resume his way onward.
What was that?
Henriette had evidently had enough of him, suggested by her firm grasp of his shoulder that urged him to face her. He looked back at her with an unfazed expression.
I knew the man. So? You're not a church hunter?
No, but I'm aware that he is not a threat as a beast. You saw him yourself.
Yes, but... it's their job, for God's sake. What would they have said if I was not accompanying you?
He provoked her further with a raising of his eyebrows and sheepish stare.
You really are impossible to work with.
He saw how she was about to turn and leave him, likely with a genuine desire to never see him again, but his words caught her.
They would have made him disappear, just like the rest. That you know to be true. What is it that we are currently doing?
She clenched both her fists. Her eyes turned over her shoulder back at him, glaring from under the brim of the top hat.
How many do you think would miss him? So many out there go missing, and we are responsible for some of them. The people know it, by the gods. But what about the rest?
You forget those that become beasts.
I do not. Many people vanish, and all have their memory besmirched by the accusation of their character, remembered as just a beast.
And what about him then, huh? How do you know?
He is a cocktail brewer.
She scoffed loudly.
Not particularly good at it, but you know how it can become after a blood transfusion. They need more of it, and they take his poorly distilled drink, not caring it tastes just like blood. But he was careful not to taste his own product.
Oh, certainly. What an innocent man. Likely the cause of so many unnecessary cases. They probably don't even know.
I never made him out to be a saint.
So then why did you stop them? Sounds like he is as much of a scourge as the beasts.
The principle, Henriette.
He waved with his finger at her.
The principle. Can they take, accuse anyone they will, and thus strain further from what a hunt means? It has become solely dependent on their judgment on who is a beast, no longer as shown by fang and claw. If they start to take control of reality like that, how can we then tell what is real or just someone's dreamt up version? What picture have the choir painted, and what have they hidden beyond the frames?
She opened her mouth angrily, but no words came of it, and her whole face turned into a defeated frown.
I'll intend to find out.
He resumed his walk, and for a time thought that he had managed to petrify Henriette in place. But upon looking over his shoulder, saw her walking there quietly. They first sighted Ludwig walking out from the place he had been presumably located, followed by the slightly taller and hulking Gratia. Ludwig smiled once he saw them approach. Before he managed to address the coincidence, Caddock was quick to take the word.
Ludwig, I just returned from the Upper Cathedral Ward, and have some things to ask of you now.
Ludwig's expression remained friendly.
Quick on to the next horse, are you, Caddock? I have some business yet, but you'll have to excuse me, Captain, but I feel I have waited long enough for this. I would appreciate the answer right now.
Ludwig turned back to Gratia, who rolled her eyes, then wordlessly lumbered away from them.
Very well. You have my attention for the moment. But you would not want to keep Gratia waiting, eh?
He smirked, but Kadok was not smitten.
I need you to tell me all you know about the choir.
This caused the smirk to fade into earnest surprise.
Might we walk a bit?
Sure. Slowly they trekked the same direction as Gratia had managed to quickly speed away in.
I gather they did not tell you what you wanted to hear.
It's not about what I want. Why did it have to be them? Is the Vicar among them? A sort of inner council?
I would presume. I know that Sir Oscar was the former Vicar and as I am aware, is still a member of the choir, albeit having relinquished the title to Vicar Patron.
Why? It could not have been a long vicarship.
No, it was not. Maybe shorter.
And how much acquainted are you with Patron?
Not as good. Not even professionally, I would say. The workshop is my domain, and the church trusts my judgment.
But who is it you answer to? Or who are you coordinating with? Someone must have instituted a church hunters. I find it hard to believe they were your idea. He hesitated. Suddenly the words had escaped him, and he even stopped in his tracks to compose himself before continuing the walk.
Well, it would be the choir then. Choir members. If you refer to more sensitive business.
But not the Vicar.
I would presume the Vicar is included. But such a large body cannot possibly be governed solely by one man. I have long seen the choir as, like you put it, an inner council of sorts. They have told me so as well. I like to believe the Holy Blades to be mine equivalent. All governing bodies have one, I would say.
Kadok lay a hand before Ludwig as they walked, and glanced over at Henriette. He motioned them away from the street, and around the corner to the nearest alley. I don't think Cainhurst is responsible for the disappearances. Not anymore, I'm not. You know how we once made people disappear, right? Being the tallest out of them all, Ludwig always appeared somewhat menacingly superior with his perpetual downward gaze. Had it not been for the mild eyes and a mouth promising a smile, one might even fear his visage. However, at times the frown would turn and his face become graven, like it did at hearing his words, and the dreaded might of the captain could be glimpsed. He only nodded silently at him. The old hunters did so in secret, but not anymore. They disappear, sure, but everyone knows about it. But what about this choir? What makes them so secretive? Even you don't know much about them.
Kadok, curiosity can easily be tarnished into a curse. I hope your intent is still as noble as the hunter you once was. I personally believe you still are. But accusing the choir, the church, suggests otherwise.
But we must still do so. I don't want to believe it. But it's not about what I want. It's about what's true. Ludwig glanced with his stony gaze at Henriette, who gave him a very subtle, pleading look.
I know enough. Each of the names you have been provided are indeed a mystery, I agree. But I can assure you that it is not the church's fault. The church hunters may have been the choir's implement and served them for mostly, but they are my hunters. All that disappears on their behalf, I'm aware of.
He slowly stepped past Kadok and towards the main street.
I wish you luck on this investigation. I am among those that deeply desires these lost souls the peace they are due. But what depravity would it mean for our town had the church turned to such foul deeds? That is a truth that is simply not possible.
Black church garb. Attire of healing church hunters. The holy shawl, a symbol of the healing church, flutters proudly on their backs. Most healing church hunters are elementary doctors who understand the importance of early prevention of the scourge, achieved by disposing of victims and even potential victims before signs of sickness manifest themselves. Their black attire is synonymous with fear and that peculiar Yarna madness.